Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Big 30 football edition of OTH Sports View. I'm JP Butler, alongside Shawn Campbell and Sam Wilson. We're back kind of talking about the same teams that we have been throughout the year here. And last week, among those New York teams, we had kind of another thrilling victory on one side, an expected win on the other, and maybe even a little bit of a surprising win from Bolivar-Richburg over Cuba-Rushford in another one of our highlighted games over the weekend. But we'll start with Shawn and Olean. How you've been with them all season long. We talked before you left for that game about how it would be nice if maybe you just had one kind of straightforward game to write about where maybe a whole lot didn't have to happen, or the game, going to overtime or something like that. And of course, no such luck. And here we are 2 weeks in a row, a second game in overtime, and once again, Olean escapes. How were they able to do it?
You wonder how they're able to keep doing this. I mean, they don't take their first lead until about a minute and a half left in the fourth quarter on Garrett Bolt's third touchdown run of the game. Then East Aurora gets the ball, has a big kick return to near midfield, drives down quickly, ties the score with 24 seconds left. Overtime again, and you just wonder, can they pull another one out here? Overtime in high school, I'd never covered an overtime game until last week.
I don't think I've seen one.
And then 2 weeks in a row, the same team to be in one 2 weeks in a row, they get the job done. East Aurora gets the ball first in overtime. Olean holds them to a 19-yard field goal, which is really huge because then they get the ball at the 20-yard line and just need a touchdown to win.
Right.
And Garrett Bolt runs down to the 1-yard line on their first play, and Dylan Vincent scores the next play, and they did it again.
We know those two kids have been huge for them this year, but you mentioned it was huge holding them to the field goal to give themselves a chance. But for the second straight week, I think they went down first in overtime after having the lead in regulation, so not an ideal position where all of a sudden you're down, but they win it. I mean, after something like that, what does Phil Vecchio have to say after a game like that?
As soon as I got down to talk to him after the game, he just looked at me and started shaking his head, and it's incredible that they can keep winning these games. And more than just being in overtime the last 2 weeks, they've actually been outgained in 4 of their games this year, and 5 of their 6 wins are by 10 points or fewer. That's pretty incredible in high school football that a team can win that many close games. They had another game against Dunkirk where they had a late touchdown pass to win too. So they have a knack for getting the job done. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, this team, not a whole lot in terms of numbers. They've had some injuries, but they seem to just have that it factor this year. And really after, I think the turning point might have been that Springville win where they just realized, we do have that ability to, to be that team this year. And now here they are, 6-0, 1 week left to potentially cap off an undefeated season. We'll talk more about that, but we'll go to Sam and Franklinville, Ellicottville.
Mm-hmm.
They go into the Portville game as, I would think, heavy favorites, Portville being winless. But this is a Portville team that did beat it last year. And then we learned at the start of the game that Franklinville is actually going to be without starting quarterback Brock Bleacha, who's really one of the best players in the Big 30, but still find a way to take care of business.
Yeah, so it wasn't the kind of major showdown they had a week before with Maple Grove. They're trying to show that they could be a number one kind of team, or the kind of back and forth dramatic game they had with Randolph. But it's still a huge game that they needed to have to keep themselves in position for the playoffs, try to get that 2 seed.
Right.
And you lose your quarterback, and even teams that don't throw the ball that much and don't rely on their quarterback, I think that's a big loss because they're the leader of the team. All that kind of stuff. But Brock has been so much more than that. He's been kind of running the whole show for them.
Right.
So I think that's a tough spot going into a Portville team that beat them last year on homecoming night without your quarterback. And and he wasn't the only guy they were without. They had 3 other guys on crutches. They only had 21 dressed for the game.
Wow.
That's a tough spot, but they kind of took care of business pretty quickly, pretty efficiently. They just ran the ball behind a nice stable of running backs. They kind of spread it around more than I've seen so far. Austin Grinnell's kind of leading the way, he was their leading rusher, and he also had their biggest passing play of the day on a halfback pass to Dooley Brennan, who's kind of their lead receiver, who had 2 touchdowns receiving on the day. So they kind of just did, the cliche, did what they had to do. They never really let Portville jump on them. They shut them out through 3 quarters and ended up with a 38-7 win.
And we do know that we talk a lot about Brock Leach on here, but we do know that they have some other guys, and this game was maybe an opportunity to kind of highlight that. You mentioned 2 of them, Austin Grinnells and Dooley Brennan. What did Chad Bartosik have to say after this one? How was he feeling going into the last week here at 5-1?
I think he was really pleased, just given the circumstances. You would expect them to win like that against Portville, and they really didn't have any let up. They didn't show any signs of being discouraged about what happened the week before or not having their quarterback. He was just pleased that they did their job. They kept it going, and obviously they have a big one coming up this week.
The other big one in New York from this past weekend, the Hyphen Bowl, we call it, Bolivar-Richburg and Cuba-Rushford. I think we thought, and maybe the general public thought, that Cuba-Rushford was the favorite in this game and maybe the team that would come out on top, although we knew they were playing a better Bolivar-Richburg team. But now we're really seeing just how good maybe Bolivar-Richburg actually is, because it's the Wolverines who win this game 21-20. They were down 20-7 with just over 9 minutes to play in the 4th quarter, and you thought, okay, maybe this is where Cuba-Rushford just kind of pulls away a little bit. Instead, Bolivar-Richburg comes down, gets a touchdown after a long drive, and then the very first play of Cuba-Rushford's next possession, an interception. Bolivar-Richburg goes down and scores again, and then down 1, they make the decision. They said, Coach Steve Smith said afterward, that it was a pretty easy decision, that they were going to go for 2, and they do. Similar to a Garrett Bolt situation at Olean, it's quarterback Devin Carr just kind of running in the 2-point conversion to give Bolivar-Richburg the lead with just over a minute left, and they end up winning that game. And now all of a sudden, here's Bolivar-Richburg at 5-1, easily their best season since their last great one in 2007, when they went undefeated and made it to the state championship game. A win that certainly solidifies a playoff spot. We talked, they were, after that big year in 07, from 2008 to 14, they won 8 total games that entire time. In these last 2 years, they've already won 10. They had a winning season last year, 5-4, and they're out to a 5-1, season this year, with a chance to finish strong again next week. So Bolivar-Richburg is a team that's really kind of vaulted itself up into among the best in the Big 30. And so we'll talk now a little bit about these teams and their playoff scenarios coming up. Olean High, we know, a week before even had already clinched a playoff spot. They clinched a home game and the division title. 1 week left to potentially finish it off and then head into the playoffs. Where does Olean stand now?
They're pretty much all locked in with having played their last league game. They'll be, as a division champ, they'll be in Class B, one of the top 3 seeds. There are 3 divisions. The top 2 finishers in each division get an automatic berth to the playoffs. Then there are 2 wild cards. So they're going to play one of the teams that's seeded 6, 7, or 8, either one of the wild cards or one of the lowest seeded second place team. So a little bit to kind of work its way out there this week. They have a non-league game against winless Salamanca, which a game you figure they should be a pretty heavy favorite in.
Right.
And if they win that, an undefeated regular season, and that hasn't happened since 2002.
Yep, my senior year of high school. I knew those guys quite well. And as we said, first playoff appearance since 2011, yes. And maybe the first chance in 11, they just made it, and it wasn't much of a game. I actually did that game, I remember. This year, maybe some hope of doing something once they get in.
I think maybe that was more of just a happy to be there type of thing. Right. But, I mean, Phil Vecchio, the coach, told me last week that the goals have changed now. That, I mean, if they make it and just lose their first playoff game, that's not really much of an accomplishment to them.
Especially after an undefeated
so
season. This is different. What's happened with them this year is different, I would say. In Class D, everybody being in the same league, same class, it's
Yep.
a pretty, it's a more straightforward situation there.
Yeah, it really is.
Franklinville, Ellicottville playing for the 2 seed
Yep.
this week.
Yeah, because you have Maple Grove, who's undefeated. They are locked into that first seed because even if they were to stumble, they have the head-to-head over the 2 one-loss teams who are going to play each other this week. That's Franklinville, Ellicottville, and Silver Creek, Forestville, which I think should be a really good game, regardless of Franklinville, Ellicottville's health situation, who comes back for them this week, or anything like that. But that will decide the 2 seed. That game's in Franklinville, and you win, you're the 2. You lose, you're the 3.
Right. So either way, no matter where they are, the test is going to be will whoever, whether it's Franklinville, Ellicottville, or Silver Creek, or whoever, be able to give Maple Grove a game down the road. I think that's what it's going to come down to. But in that same division, the one other New York team who's kind of been hanging in there is Randolph. They got a big 33-7 victory over Frewsburg over the weekend to at least give themselves a shot, an outside shot, at the number 4 seed in a home game in the playoffs. But they would need a lot to.
The problem there, of course, is that they play Maple Grove, and I know that's a big rivalry, but just given how Maple Grove has looked this year, they would have to be underdogs going in, and then they would need it to break right with the other game between. There are 3 teams tied there for 4th currently, Clymer, Sherman, Panama, and Frewsburg. So it doesn't seem likely, but there is a scenario out there where there could be a 4, they could be a 5, they could be a 6. Yeah.
Right. And Shawn, you had taken a quick look at this going into the Bolivar-Richburg Cuba-Rushford game in your story, just kind of the playoff situation there. It's a little clearer now with 1 week left. Bolivar-Richburg clinched, a spot certainly with that win. They're up to number 5 now in that scenario. Where are those 2 teams just as a whole?
Well, with this week, I think it mainly is they'd be playing for maybe a potential home game in the playoffs if they could get up to that number 4 spot. It looks like Cuba-Rushford's probably in comfortably as well. There's kind of a big,
even at 7.
There's kind of a big drop off. The top 8 teams in the class make it, and after 8, there's a pretty big drop from 8 to 9. So it looks like they're probably in pretty safely. I believe they play Geneseo this week too, and that's probably a game they should win.
Right. So even with a loss, both teams I think were a little weary of if a loss, maybe that's going to hurt our chances a little bit. But like you mentioned, there is a drop off after 8, so both teams seem to be in. Very quickly in Pennsylvania, Kane just continues to roll. They could very well be the best team in the Big 30. We don't talk a whole lot about being a French school. They just absolutely roll past Bradford High. They're unbeaten at 7-0, and then it looks, especially after another win this weekend, as if Coudersport has really taken control in the AML North at 4-3, probably the favorite in their last 2 games now.
Well, they play Otto Eldred this week, and they're also 3-0 in the North too. So that's really the huge game in the North is this weekend. So Otto Eldred might have something to say about that.
That's true. And then between the 2, they'll end up most likely at this point, I think, playing Kane. Although I think Brockway might still be unbeaten in the South as well.
Kane Brockway
and they still have to play as well. So we'll see some interesting storylines there. We don't get into a whole lot, but we will as we continue to go forward with playoff situations and teams that are separating themselves with a week and in PA 2 weeks remaining in the regular season. And so we'll come back to a lot of that stuff next week. But as far as this week, thanks again for watching.